trying to decide what to talk about and to dive into something versus to do a flyby. I've been looking at quotes. If folks, I don't know if folks know where I sit, but I sit up in the third floor, and I keep like a little quote board that I update about once a week or so with quotes. And I've been in my mind, and I came across a quote recently, and it was a John Wooden quote, and it's the little details that are vital. Little things make the big things happen, and that kind of struck me in so many of the things that I do around here, and work with teams and see people doing. It's actually true within research in general. When I was in college and doing biochem and studying collagen, doing bench research on that, it's kind of like, well, how is this saving lives or making a difference? But you really realize how it really takes a village, and how a lot of folks contributing are really can bend the universe. So those are the objectives. Yeah, get your CME. One of the key projects, so I'm going to do kind of a flyby of the different projects that I work on, and hopefully I'll run short because I think Paul's a lot more interesting to listen to. So, but a big project I've been working on is Precision Health, and this is part of the one of the grand challenges, and so folks are probably aware, but I don't know how much folks are aware of kind of what Regenstrief's role or what we're doing in this space. And there's various definitions of precision health out there, and I'm not going to run through the definition, but I generally like the notion of thinking of it as providing precisely the right care to the patient. Like imagine going to the doctor, and your doctor treats you not based on what studies have been done, and not just based on their knowledge or their training, and not just what you've told them, but based on your genetics, based on details about you that you may not even know, and they may not even know, but they can get from data collection. Surely Google knows a lot more about any of us than any of us know. But if we could get to where the treatment patients receive is really tailored to meet their specific needs. And the example I give for that, and this is really, if you put it into reality for me in terms of precision health, was the privilege to sit in on a tumor board meeting for the adult precision genomics team. And for those that don't know, there's some really cutting edge and really cool things going on campus here. And the precision genomics is kind of this tip of that spear. I sat in on a tumor board meeting, and this is a meeting where oncologists, and we're talking, Larry Einhorn, who kind of created the cure for testicular cancer, and some of the national leaders in oncology are sitting in alongside genomics experts, pharmacogenomic experts, people that know how drugs and genetics relate. Sitting with people that run research grants, people that are touching various aspects of the care system, and they all get in a room and they go through a series of cases, and these are generally cases where people have failed initial treatment for a cancer, and they come to this group. A story is told, like a slide goes up, and they say, "Here's the history. This patient has gone through the first set of chemo, is failing." And then they dive into the genetics, and they say, here's what we know about this person's genome. Here's what we know about the tumor they have and its genetic makeup, and what burden there is in terms of mutations. Here's the drugs they're on. Here's based on their genetics, we know that the second line treatment or the next treatment we would traditionally turn to is going to fail, because it doesn't match what we know about them. And so it's actually this fourth line thing, this thing that we would have taken a year or more of failed attempts to get to, that we know is going to be most effective based on their tumor, based on their genetics. And then the pharmacogenomics guy speaks up and says, well, if you're going to give them on that treatment regimen, you better stop their proton pump inhibitor, stop their Nexium because that's going to interfere based on their, the type of genetics they have. And then they say, okay, well, now we know the most effective thing is going to be this thing that we may not have ever gotten to with this patient. A researcher pipes up and says, hey, they're running a new study and they just started it up in Fort Wayne. They're enrolling patients right now. And in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, you go from trying to do the best you can for a patient to really seeing very precise care and laser targeted at that individual. And to see that happening, and I do clinic at Eskenazi, I'm a general internist. And I think if when I'm seeing a diabetic patient or a hypertensive patient, I would love to have that capability of not just guessing, okay, let's try a blood pressure medicine. I had a conversation just yesterday with a patient. We were going to start him on some blood pressure medicine, and well, let's talk about what the options are. And to be able to say, well, let's skip all those and go straight to this thing we would have gotten to next year because it's the right medicine for you is a world I think we're going to get to. But that, in my mind, is what precision health is. We have a role in that at Regan Street because we've been asked in this grand scheme of things, in this grand challenge, to set up the infrastructure. And to give you an idea of what that is, to simplify it as much as humanly possible, there's data sources. Regan Street magic happens, and a lot of people see it as, okay, that goes off to Lifomic, and at least this is what a lot of the folks on the disease teams that are involved. And this is kind of what they see happening. And you can look at it a different way. You could look at it and say, well, there's study data that's being collected in REDCap, and people are entering things in REDCap. There's EMR data coming from IU Health, IMPC, and those are some of the data sources that are going through. But you could also turn and say, well, it's really EMR data. There's genomic data coming in from different groups, and we're working on getting exposure data from Polis, which are things about social determinants. We just got out of a meeting with a multiple myeloma group about looking at toxic exposures in areas and how that might relate to multiple myeloma, and pulling that into this kind of data commons that we're building and tooling that we're building for precision health. But it gets more complicated than that. There are a ton of these things, and all you have to do is look at the blood, sweat, and tears on some of the people in this room to understand that it's a large, and I can see, I think Clint's blood pressure just went up a little bit when I switched to this slide, but he's like, no, I got this. But there's a lot of various sources of genomic data. There's a growing number of sources for EMR data, for like the Polis data, but other studies that are going on. We're having to supply terminologies. A lot of that magic that happens in the Regan Street, that kind of pipeline or ETL, is normalizing the data, dealing with patient matching, and getting things coerced to the right terminology. Because at the end of the day, the Precision Health Cloud and the tooling we're sending those data to isn't really ready to deal with the truth or the real life data that exists in the world. And any of you that get to touch medical data probably have learned that it's not always as pretty as you think. And that's one of the things that I find fun in my job, is being able to see how the sausage is made and deal with those hard problems and finding ways around them. And the truth, it gets more complicated. We're not just a pipeline sending data. We are pulling data into IU services, creating a data commons that is actually within kind of the Regan Street /IU world as a staging area and where data can sit and be used for multiple purposes, including research commons and other tools that may not go to Lifomic. Lifomic really isn't the only place data are going. There's other tooling used for that. So the message is the infrastructure for precision health is messy, it's ugly, there's a lot of moving pieces, it's growing. This is not even remotely representative because there's additional projects coming online. So there's a lot of arrows going everywhere, but showing you a slide with a bazillion things and a million arrows wouldn't really accomplish anything. So hopefully at least you get an idea that there's a lot of detail that's being dealt with in this. But what comes out the other end and what people are seeing are tools like this, which are disease state teams being able to pull in data that represents chemotherapy, data collected from their study data in REDCap, combined with EMR data pulled from IU Health, combined with genomic data. They can, this is like, for example, a shot from what the multiple myeloma team sees on when they're looking at a patient. They can dive into a Genomics Explorer and look at genomic data about the patient, look at specific mutations and explore those and do those based on cohorts or other findings. There's trials, being able to search trials. We're leveraging a company's database and API to provide patient-specific trial data in the system. And so all that's coming together. We're pivoting now from showing patients and looking at patient-level data toward more insights and cohort-level things coming up. So in this next year, kind of in 2019 and going on to 2020, we're moving from piloting and really demonstrating this and getting those pieces more toward production system, and that's really happening imminently. That we're moving from a research effort to a real production system that can support research efforts going on in precision health. Like I said, we're pivoting to cohort analyses. We're moving more from the structured data in toward unstructured data. As I mentioned, talking with Polis and talking to the multiple myeloma folk, we're working on pulling in exposure data and making that a primary part of the platform. There's a lot of interesting things happening in patient engagement. And actually, Lifomic has a tool called Life Extends, or LX, that is an app that patients can download, people can download, and get engaged with their genomic data, kind of get into this precision health cloud from the patient's perspective. And there's, like I mentioned, a lot of other projects coming on. It seems like every month or so, if not faster, there's a new incredible use of these types of data or new data to bring on board. And so that's some of the fun and some of the challenge going on in precision health. And the truth is, it's the people. And if anything I learned in the open source world, it wasn't about the code. It's about the people. And I'm sure I've left people off, and I got to apologize for that. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, these were the names that came right to mind of the people that are doing those, whether it's be Harsh or Akshay writing a line of code, or it's one of the BAs handling a requirement. Those things are turning into what is a phenomenal tool and environment for precision health that is going to put IU in a position to be a leader in the field. And specifically, I just take a little digression in this space, because we're getting into more of the patient space. This is just an area of interest of mine. And since this is a work in progress, I figured, even though it's raw, I would share. I'm really interested in the space of how do we take people that are just, Joe Schmo or Jane Doe, who are out in the ether loading an app on their phone. How do we get them to be connected to their EMR? And the traditional way would be to say, okay, well, let's use a PHR, but PHRs, not everybody signed up for a PHR. I don't know how many people in this room are signed up for a PHR, a personal health record. Yeah, that's what I figured. So there's some people, but it's not, you don't get your full population there. And so can we come up with innovative ways of connecting them? And there are ways to go that require changes to the workflow of an institution. But one thing I'm interested in is, can we come up with innovative ways or new ways of connecting patients to the EMR? For example, can we introduce just one field in the registration process where a patient could, if they were incentivized to do something on their phone, present a QR code, and all the person registering or collecting the lab would need to do is go into that field and then zap the QR code with a reader, and would collect data that then could be processed into either questionnaire responses or a magic key or something that would help us connect the patient to the medical record. Another way is triangulating information we have. So imagine you're in a doctor's exam room waiting for the doctor to show up, and you see a study. This happens all the time. People have studies up on the walls advertising, hey, join this back pain study. And what if the QR code on that or the text code was specific not to just the study, but to that room, so that we could triangulate to know that we know by appointment data that you are being seen that day. And if you scan that code, maybe the bar can be a little lower in terms of the types of questions we have to ask to know it's actually you. And so anyway, this is a space I'm interested in. If folks are interested or working in this kind of space, I just put an invitation that I'd love to talk with you. I'm going to try to keep moving because I'm going to take too long. Some of the fun stuff I've been able to do, and really it's been a joy doing, is working with Chris Harley, a public health informatics guy on campus here, and we're lucky to have him. I've learned a lot from him, but I've worked on a few studies. An art grant he set up on really, and I think very wisely, first in terms of chronic pain management, understanding the space. And so we did a study where almost 100 interviews were done about visits where people were taking care of chronic pain patients, and not, really just trying to learn what's happening in that space, what are the challenges, what's affecting care, and codifying those interviews and turning it into really useful data. And that's been a real fun project to work on. It's cool that it's gone not just at Eskenazi, but also IU Health, but it's also multiple sites involved in that. And another grant built on that is working on building what Chris refers to as the one sheet, or it's a dashboard. He likes one sheet better, as too many dashboards in the world. And so, but as a tool to help people in chronic pain care. And I'll show you a quick shot of that. And then we've also been talking about next directions as these studies are coming to an end of, do we take some of this kind of one sheet or some of these tooling and make them smart on fire? Do we start taking advantage of some of the data we've learned from these studies and help guide chronic pain patients through the care system? And so there's some kind of neat grant ideas coming out of that are kind of a work in progress right now. The one sheet just, it brings together, and this is kind of a 2.0 version of it, but it brings together information. It's primarily diagnoses that are relevant to chronic pain, medications, orders, access to the critical PDMP, which tells opioid or controlled substance prescriptions, outcome information about PEG scores or activity scores. What are the goals for the patient, which is always so often missed or lost after a couple of years of chronic pain care. And other relevant clinical data, bringing those together. And so this is actually happening at Eskenazi. I've had it for more than a month or two available to me as I'm taking care of chronic pain patients, and it's being piloted. I'll pivot real quickly and to another fun project I've been lucky enough to get involved with, which is Tom Imperiali's innovative Preventorium. And the notion of this is to give patients a personalized prescription for their preventive care. Too many people don't know what kind of preventive care services are available to them or what they should be getting. And Tom's innovation is to say, let's get that in their hands so that they can have a discussion with a doctor and maybe promote more preventive care happening in the country. A team has already spent from an innovation grant building out a system that uses a rules engine, both to determine what questions should be asked of a patient and then to take their responses and turn it into a prescription, and generates both hard and soft recommendations. So you really should get a tetanus shot or talk to your doctor about a pneumonia shot, because we don't know quite sure that you should have it, but it looks like you probably should. Right now we're targeting cancer prevention, a few of those, and also a few vaccines. And we've gotten a cross collaboration grant to specifically go through, generate some demo data. So we'll use like some Cynthia or the Massachusetts data, as well as creating a simulator to run through and generate as if patients, those demo patients, were filling out the surveys, and then doing the Pepsi challenge. And I think my gray hair allows me to know what a Pepsi challenge is, and there's probably a lot of people here who have never heard of it. But Pepsi a while ago wanted to convince people that Pepsi was better than Coke. Fake news. But they did this Pepsi challenge where they blind people and they trick them into saying Pepsi was better. Anyway, so the goal there is that Tom and I and the Preventorium are going to go through a set of these demo patients and come up with what we think they should get in terms of preventive care, and see does a Preventorium hold up against just standard of care. And with the goal being, and I think this is what the goal of a cross collaboration grant is to take that information and use that as grist to then apply for a grant to take the work further. And for me, I've gotten a lot of times to see Tom get up and present, and he speaks much better than I do about describing things. He takes complex ideas, makes them simple, and I'm just excited to get to work with him. So another thing that I have the fortune of getting involved with is the clinical learning platform. And for folks who don't know, that's a education system that the Gopher system that we created for medical ordering turned into G3, and that was deployed for a while, and that got evolved into a platform for teaching people how to work with EMRs. And there's a lot of really cool things it can do, and it's gotten some real uptake. I'm lucky to have a chance to try to help work with that team. There's amazing tools built in already. There's a pivot happening right now because historically they have, through Chris's leadership, in terms of kind of from a business mind standpoint, they've been kind of selling it as software, and there's been a lot of roadblocks to that because it's hard for someone running a medical school to say, oh, I'm going to buy this software. They have to jump through a lot of hoops. To a consortium model where they say, instead of buying the software, join this consortium on medical education, and as a side effect of joining, you get access to this software. And that model is proving to open some doors in terms of getting more groups engaged. The question right now, and the challenge for the clinical learning platform, is kind of how does it scale? I'm in this catch-22 of getting more groups involved. How do you get more groups involved so you can resource more work on the platform versus do you need to put more work in the platform before you can get more groups involved? And that's, I think, part of the hard problem that I'm hopefully going to help the team in trying to work through. And I have to take a short digression into this thing that was initially called the Teaching EMR. It got nicknamed Teamer, and everybody got used to calling it the Teamer. The AMA has been a big sponsor behind it, and it got renamed to the Regan Street VHR Clinical Learning Platform, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue as easily. And so this is why you shouldn't let Burke play with PowerPoint. So everybody was calling it Teamer, and I'm like, we're supposed to be calling it the Clinical Learning Platform or the Regan Street VHR Clinical Learning Platform. If you call it the Clinical Learning Platform, nobody even knows what it is. Teamer, it was great because you knew it was an EMR, but the AMA didn't really like teaching in the name, and so the thought was, well, why not, instead of teaching, why don't we go to learning? And that immediately brought up the notion of these guys are awesome. They've got great vision, and I think that's a great attribute. I don't know if you've heard the calls of a lemur, but I'm convinced that if we adopted this, we could. I mean, how cute could that be? And if we adopted it, I'm pretty sure that all the Loink pigs that were malfunctioning, the voice box was malfunctioning, we could probably repurpose and use for little lemur calls. So anyway, I can't get up here and not talk about OpenMRS, so I'm going to fly through. I don't know how much time do I have? 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do a flyby on OpenMRS. There's a ton of cool things happening in this space. Folks probably know this is an open source project. Paul and I got to help out the AMPATH or Kenya project in 2004. And by having the fortune of running into another group in Partners in Health, that was doing very similar work and collaborating with them and doing things openly, it kind of blossomed to an open source project that is now going gangbusters. It continues to grow and adoption is going all around the world. We just had a meeting in Nairobi in 2018. It was really cool. I think some of the highlights for me were when in the bottom left here, 13 different people stood up that had gotten scholarships to come to the meeting from around different countries, not just in Africa, but primarily in Africa, but young, bright people that want to contribute to this space and help save the world through medical records, able to come to the meeting because of scholarships we were able to generate through sponsorship. And that was really cool to see. And then the second favorite moment was the fact that I noticed that Paul had to go through, and they're really big on certificates in Africa. And so everybody needs a certificate saying they came to the conference. And Paul, doing his due diligence, had to sign every one of them. And I was walking by the table stacked with him for everybody to pick theirs up, and I noticed he had signed his own. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. He giving himself a certificate. So I had to get a picture of it. So I did a little bit of iPhone magic, and I got a picture of Paul giving himself a certificate. Anyway, we're doing Google Summer Code, and that's a really cool thing if folks don't know about it. But Google kind of draws attention away from the things that they shouldn't be doing with open source to the things that they're doing, incredible things they are doing with open source by sponsoring this program, and gets open source organizations involved, draws students in, and they all compete to work for these organizations, and Google funds them over the summer, gives them a stipend to work, and the open source project gets a small stipend as well for mentoring them. And we've got 13 projects this year. We've been able to do this every year since 2007. And it's even cooler, not just the projects and what's happening with it, but to see that the program now is being administered by a prior student, someone who Suthagar came out of India and was working on some of the projects and in OpenMRS, and now has grown into, now he's administering the project. And it's really cool to see, those, all the people touching it from different places coming up, and it constantly reminds me of the miracles that I've gotten to witness, Paul and I've gotten to witness. There's one right back there. I don't know if folks know Saranga, but that we met him through OpenMRS, and now we're going to be working for him pretty soon. So the other really cool thing that happened is we had some great discussions at that meeting in Nairobi, and I put out a post talking about the amazing future of OpenMRS. I know that really doesn't look like an amazing future by the diagram, but there's a point to it. I put out a little post to say, hey, there's a lot of opportunity in OpenMRS, but what has happened technically is we've got a great platform and people are sharing it, but technology has moved forward and people are starting to write front ends and they're using different technologies. And a lot of funding is going at the country levels. And what we're ending up with is a lot of people doing great things, but they're starting to get siloed. And as they start to build their own custom front ends, we have people that are starting to invest in things that just they themselves own. And a perfect example is one of the most prolific and kind of really successful examples is Ampath, under JJ's leadership, and they built some functionality that the clinicians really love at Ampath, but it's Ampath's now, and it's not part of the OpenMRS kind of public good, and so they end up now owning it and having to own every change or new feature in it, and people are starting to feel that and want to come together. There's been for years the notion of microservices or the way of breaking down an application into separate pieces to try to make it easier to scale and to manage. But a newer thing that's happening now is a notion called micro front ends. And what that is that's going the other direction and saying you can have the microservices on the back end, but micro front ends says, let's take a web application and break it into pieces and allow different groups or different efforts to produce different parts of that front end in a way that they can be woven together and for the user feel like one application. And so there's a lot of this conversation about where can we go in terms of collaboration led to discovery of this micro front end stuff. We actually got one of the leaders in that space who's developed one of the most popular libraries in micro front ends called SingleSpa, to join the community, and is now this week at a hackathon that Kenya is holding with a lot of different groups throughout Kenya, but also throughout other countries in Africa, to start hacking in this space and building micro front ends. And JJ's over there, and the discussions are around how can we start building the next generation of OpenMRS tooling in a way that we can all work together and weave these things together. So it's exciting to see. The next meeting is going to be in Mozambique. We're going back to Mozambique. It always freaks me out a little bit in terms of their flag. With the T-shirts we got have these weapons on them, and as a pacifist, it's a little rough, but it's also, again, it's a privilege to be able to have these international meetings and go to a lot of different places. So anyway, that's a whirlwind tour. I want to get out of the way. And speaking of little things, making the big things happen, I'm the little thing, Paul's the big thing. Speaking of big things, that's the end. So. I don't know if there's probably, there's not really much time for questions, but you folks, hopefully you know how to find me. I'm up on the 3rd floor, and I'm generally wandering around. And if you ask anybody where Burke is, they can get you to me. I love that opportunities I've gotten to do cross collaboration, and I'm eager to find more of them. So folks that are looking for kind of informatics assistance, reach out to me, and because the more I can get of that, the happier I am.